We had a wonderful time spending the last few weeks in Louisiana, and now we are heading to the Crescent City, New Orleans, where we are looking forward to checking out the sights and eating some delicious foods. Keisha's mom was coming to visit us down here as well. We spent 2 weeks at Bayou Seignette State Park, just a 20-minute drive from downtown New Orleans. This state park has a large campground, and the sites were fairly big, with water and electric hookups. There are a couple of boardwalks that cut across the campground, and there are also bathrooms and showers, as well as laundry rooms. The state park also has these floating cabins available to rent, and the park also offers a boat ramp, a wave pool, and a large picnic area complete with hiking trails to explore. This was a beautiful and quiet state park just outside of New Orleans, and we had a great time staying here and exploring. We spent our first day in New Orleans hanging out in the French Quarter. Our first order of business was heading to the world-famous Café du Monde. Sometimes there can be a long line winding around the building, but we stopped by here at about 11 a.m. on a Thursday in January. And surprisingly, we didn't have to wait to get a seat. We ordered some beignets, which are kind of like donuts, that were delicious and absolutely covered in powdered sugar. An employee told us that they go through about 1,000 pounds of powdered sugar each day. That is insane. But you can see how when you look at how much is piled onto these beignets. We enjoyed our beignets and then headed across the street to Jackson Square. This place is pretty neat. There are some old buildings surrounding the square, including the building where the official transfer of the Louisiana Purchase took place, as well as the oldest continually rented apartments in the country. The St. Louis Cathedral is the main star here. This statue of Andrew Jackson is pretty neat as well. There are artists selling their paintings and street performers all around the block entertaining people passing by. This is a beautiful square in the historic French Quarter. After checking out Jackson Square, we stopped at the Crescent City Brewhouse to grab a few beers and wait for Keisha's mom to get to town. Once she got settled into her hotel, we took another stroll along the Mississippi Riverfront. We enjoyed a late lunch at the Creole Cookery inside the French Quarter, where I ordered a fried oyster po' boy with fries, and Keisha ordered the catfish Decatur, which was a fried catfish sitting on a bed of jambalaya. The next day we got our 3-day passes for the hop-on, hop-off bus tour, which also came with 2 free walking tours. This bus takes you all around the city, with about 19 stops where you can hop off the bus and explore, and then hop back on when the bus comes back around. We rode the bus for the entire 1.5-hour tour at first, to see what kind of places we'd like to stop at in the future. When we got back to the French Quarter, we walked to the Napoleon house to grab some lunch. This building was built in 1797, and in 1821 it was offered to Napoleon to be his residence during his exile. However, Napoleon never made it there. Now this is a restaurant serving up a New Orleans original, Muffaletta. Muffaletta is a sandwich consisting of a round Sicilian loaf, split horizontally and covered with salami, ham, cheese, and an olive salad spread. It is usually served cold, but the Napoleon House serves it warm, which is why we wanted to try it. We ordered a whole muffaletta, as well as a boudin link as an appetizer. The muffaletta was so good. The bread is delicious, and the olive salad is an interesting addition to a warm Italian sandwich. We really enjoyed this meal.
So I don't even like green olives, but somehow this works. It's really good. Nom, 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 nom.
After lunch, we walked to the riverfront, where we boarded the Steamboat Natchez. This is the last working, authentic steamboat on the Mississippi River, and we did the 2 p.m. sightseeing jazz cruise, which took us around the Algiers Point Bend and down past the Chalmette battlefield, where we turned around and headed back. This was a really neat boat ride, and we saw some cool barges and ships while on the river. We were also able to check out the engine room. The Natchez even let off some steam a few times, blowing the Creole Queen's horn out of the water. For dinner, we stopped at the Crescent City Brewhouse again, where Keisha ordered chicken cracklins, and her mom and I each ordered a soft-shell crab po' boy with Parmesan garlic fries. The food here was pretty good. On Saturday, we met Keisha's mom near Jackson Square for our French Quarter walking tour. This was a 45-minute tour that took us around Jackson Square, into the cathedral, and back up to the riverfront. And our guide gave us some history on some of the buildings in this part of the French Quarter. Afterwards, we took the bus to the St. Louis Cemetery No. 1, where we had a 1-hour guided tour of the cemetery. It was very interesting to see the different tombs, some that were very old, as well as some newer ones such as this tomb that will be the final resting place of actor Nicolas Cage. We learned a lot about the history of the cemetery and some of the people buried there, such as Homer Plessy, known for his act of civil disobedience, and his Plessy versus Ferguson court case, as well as Marie Laveau, a voodoo priestess whose tomb is marked with several triple X's, which is part of a tradition to have Ms. Laveau grant you a wish. We also learned that these tombs don't hold just one person, they actually hold several, and a body is left inside the tomb for at least 1 year and 1 day, after which the remains that have been baking inside of the tomb in the hot and humid New Orleans weather are swept into a bag and placed into another part of the tomb, leaving the main chamber for the next body. Gruesome, but very interesting. This was a really neat tour, and we enjoyed learning so much from our guide. After the cemetery tour, we hopped back on the bus and hopped off at the Garden District. We walked around a little bit and then decided to stop for lunch at Joey K's. Here I ordered a roast beef po' boy combo that came with jambalaya and red beans and rice. Keisha ordered some catfish tacos. It was pretty good. The next day we went back to New Orleans and had lunch at Coop's place in the French Quarter. This place was known for their rabbit and sausage jambalaya. I ordered the fried chicken, which came with a side of jambalaya, and Keisha ordered the chicken chapatoulas, which was a grilled chicken breast in a cream sauce with shrimp and ham. Everything here was very good. After lunch, we walked through the French market to see what the vendors were selling. There was a lot of art, clothing, jewelry, and other items for sale. We then took the bus to the Garden District, where we hopped off for our walking tour of the neighborhood. This tour took us through part of the Garden District, where we got an up-close view of some large and beautiful houses on live oak-lined streets. We had a very entertaining guide that showed us several houses and gave us a lot of information about the neighborhood. It was really awesome to see some of these gorgeous houses decorated for Mardi Gras. For dinner, we ate at Café Maspero in the French Quarter. The Creole stuffed fish with jambalaya and veggies was delicious. On Monday, we took the ferry from Algiers Point to Canal Street in New Orleans. On-street parking at Algiers Point was free, and it is $2 per ride on the ferry, or if you download the La Pass app, you can buy a 24-hour pass for $3. We had beignets at Café Beignet, then took an Uber to the World War II Museum. This museum is spread out over 6 buildings and spans 3 city blocks. It is enormous, and there is so much to see here. There is tons of information to read and many videos to watch. And there are many planes and vehicles that are on display here. We spent hours walking through this remarkable and moving museum. And we still felt like we had only seen half of what this place has to offer. This museum is a must-see for anyone. Whether or not you are into history, you will find something here that moves you. We were hungry after spending hours walking around the World War II Museum, so we stopped at the Napoleon house again for another muffaletta. Afterwards, we headed back to the campground to hunker down for the winter storm that was approaching.
Snowing in New Orleans.
The next day, the storm hit. It was cold, windy, and snowing. It was crazy to see it snowing in New Orleans. We definitely weren't expecting that on this trip. And it just kept snowing. In the end, we got around 9 inches of snow, which of course started to melt the next day. However, since this is New Orleans and they rarely get snow, in fact, this broke the previous record. The city was not equipped to handle this amount of winter weather. So the highways and public transportation were shut down for about 3 days. So we spent a lot of time in the camper keeping warm. We were able to go out for dinner one night. We drove to Crawlins Seafood in Terrytown, where I ordered a fried catfish po' boy, and Keisha had fried catfish and shrimp with garlic noodles. It was nice to get out of the camper and get some delicious food again. They finally opened the elevated highways and public transportation on Friday afternoon. On Saturday morning, we had breakfast at Waffle House, then drove an hour upriver, where we visited the Alley Plantation and the Whitney Plantation. First, we stopped at Oak Alley, known for its picturesque live oak alley leading to the big house. You can catch this view from the road, but we decided to tour the plantation. which includes a self-guided tour of the grounds, and for extra money, you can get a guided tour of the big house. The big house tour was very interesting. Our guide gave us a lot of information on the building of the house and a few of the owners that had lived there. Unfortunately, you cannot take photos inside the house. After the big house tour, we walked down the beautiful oak alley, then through the gardens. We also learned about sugarcane production and toured the slave quarters, where there were stories of individual slaves and what they had to endure on the plantation. These grounds and the big house were gorgeous, but we cannot forget that the house was built by, and the land was worked by, enslaved people. After touring the Oak Alley Plantation, we drove a little ways down the road to the Whitney Plantation. This plantation has guided and self-guided audio tours that showcase a very slave-oriented history of the plantation. We did the self-guided audio tour, which took us all over the grounds, including the big house, the kitchen, and the jail, which was similar to holding pens used at slave auctions. We also walked past the slave quarters, the path through which was lined with sugar kettles, which were used to cook down the sugar cane. There were a few memorials, including this very moving memorial for the German Coast Uprising, which was a slave rebellion that took place in 1811, as well as a wall of honor that lists the names of 350 slaves who had lived and worked on the plantation. This plantation was more of a museum that had a powerful message that slavery was horrible and the atrocities of slavery must never be forgotten. After checking out both plantations, we headed back to New Orleans, where we walked down Bourbon Street and had dinner at NOLA Poboys. The surf and turf and shrimp po' boys were so good. After dinner, we walked to Pat O'Brien's, the original home of the Hurricane, so we each ordered a Hurricane and continued checking out Bourbon Street. It was a blast. Before heading back to the camper, we stopped at Café du Monde one last time to get some beignets. Seriously, they are so good. We had a wonderful time in New Orleans. Even though we lost a few days of exploring because of the winter weather, we were still able to see and do a lot, as well as eat some delicious foods. We had a lot of fun on the Steamboat Natchez, were humbled by the World War II Museum and the Whitney Plantation, and had a great time walking through the French Quarter and Bourbon Street. We can't wait to come back to New Orleans again and see and eat even more. Hope you enjoyed.